For me, it began in 1992 with an ending. I was 5 years old and happened upon a comic shop advertising the death of Superman in its window display. From that moment forward, the Man of Steel has been my favorite character. And now, on this podcast, I'm exploring my fandom and examining the creative visions that have shaped the last son of Krypton across media for over 80 years. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. This episode, we are talking about the two versions of Superman 2, the 1980 theatrical cut, filmed in part by Richard Donner and completed by Richard Lester, and the Donner cut itself, released on DVD in 2006. And joining me is returning guest, comic book artist, V Ken Marion.
Hey, Anthony, how's it going? Thanks again for having me.
You know, I'm excited for all of these episodes. I feel like I say this at the start of every episode, but it's true. I am always excited to do these with you and with the other guests. And what I'm especially excited about with this one is that you and I really have not compared notes. We exchanged, so you and I each separately rewatched both cuts of Superman 2 over the past couple of weeks. And we exchanged some messages, but it was mostly along the lines of like, oh, I got a lot of thoughts about this. But we didn't unpack it. And I'm glad, because I think that'll give us a real fresh conversation for this episode.
Oh, totally, totally. This movie, so it's so not what I remember at all. And okay, I don't know how to say this, but it's different. Let me preface it by saying that we talked about this already in our very first Digging for Kryptonite episode. Was Christopher Reeve is my, like, in the suit, he is my favorite Superman. So I just want the listeners to know that I'm not trying to just like bag on this movie, because I think some of that will come out a little bit. And I still think that the first Christopher Reeve movie is my favorite superhero movie ever. Like, that is still, to me, like, holds up. It's so good. Love it. That being said, I think that's the only one of his movies that's actually good, is the first one. Yeah. Listen,
I appreciate that disclaimer, and I'll issue a couple of my own here as well for our audience. So first of all, for anyone who's like, hey, you guys haven't even done Superman the movie yet, what are you doing jumping to Superman 2? We'll do Superman the movie. We'll get to that. But, you know, like I said to you in that first episode, like when I was first mapping out this podcast, I made a very conscious choice that I wasn't going to necessarily follow a set order. I wasn't going to go chronologically. Like, I wanted the freedom to kind of jump around a little bit. And, you know, Superman the movie has been well covered. Everyone knows it. I felt we were safe jumping into Superman 2. Again, though, we will do a Superman the movie episode, and I would love to have you on for that if you would like. I'll invite you officially now for that.
Totally.
The other reason why I wanted to do, or the main reason I wanted to do Superman 2 now, is that this episode about Superman 2, this will be out in early March. As of this recording, we don't yet have a release date for the Snyder Cut of Justice League, but we are anticipating it will come out in March. And assuming it does, the plan is for us to be back on this podcast at the end of March, breaking down the Snyder Cut. So in thinking about the Snyder Cut, it occurred to me, it's not the only Superman movie where a director was replaced and there are two versions of the movie. And so naturally I went to Superman 2 and I was like, well, I think it would be really interesting in the lead up to the Snyder Cut to take a look at this other example of a Superman movie that exists in two forms.
Totally. And I don't know if we want to get into, do we want to get in right in like which one we think is better, or do we say that for the end?
No, I think we should say that. But one more. I'll issue one more disclaimer along the lines of what you said, because I have a feeling. So I think based on what you already said, I think you and I are very much aligned in terms of our take on Superman 2. And, you know, for anyone listening or watching who's like, what's with these guys? Like, they love the Snyder movies, they don't like the Donner movie. Again, let me say this, and when we do Superman the movie, I think a lot of this will come up again, but it's worth saying here. There is a tremendous amount that I respect about what Richard Donner and Christopher Reeve brought to both the first two movies, especially the first one, and to the character of Superman generally. I very much appreciate the reverence that Donner had for the material. You know, this wasn't a time where there were a ton of superhero adaptations. This could have gone in a lot of different directions, but he treated it. So he treated it with respect. He gave us a sweeping, epic, like mythic origin story. Christopher Reeve, again, in the suit. I'm with you on that. In the suit.
He's the best. In the suit, he's the best. Yeah.
It's, you know, one of the all-time great performances in anything, but certainly in a superhero movie. So there's a lot about Donner and Reeve and the first two movies that I do love. But And I think, this is kind of an important thing. And I don't know that I've really shared this much with you off mic, but after we put up our Snyder episode, right, in defense of Zack Snyder's Superman, we talked about Man of Steel and BVS. I got to tell you, man, I got a lot of nice feedback. And there were a lot of people who, wrote to me or commented on the episode and said that they weren't like, oh, I love the movies now. But a number of people were like, this kind of made me think about them in a little different way. And I'm actually kind of thinking about rewatching them now. Which is awesome. And like that wasn't, and like that wasn't our, we didn't set out with that, with that goal in mind necessarily, but like, it's a nice byproduct. But my point is, I know for both of us, because we talked about it in the episode, like there was a lot more that I think we kind of took from those movies upon rewatching them. And that's my point. Like when you revisit this stuff with fresh eyes, hopefully, it either holds up, it matches or exceeds what you remember it to be. But then there are instances like Superman 2, and, it's like, I definitely remembered it being better than I found it to be upon a rewatch.
Well, let me ask you this. How many times have you actually seen Superman 2 prior to this?
I mean, probably a handful. So like, Superman 2, the theatrical cut, I mean, I've watched that. Again, I don't have a hard count, but maybe a handful of times over the course of my life. Not in a good few years, though. But I've seen it numerous times. The Donner cut I only watched once when it first came out on DVD in 2006. And so this was the first time that I was watching the two of them back to back, which was fascinating. And only the second time I was watching the Donner cut, and the first time in a good number of years that I was watching Superman 2. So I think that all of that really kind of gave me an interesting perspective.
Okay, yeah, because I watched, so Superman 1, I've watched, like we talked about previously, I've seen that gotta be over 30 times. I love that movie, it's great. I've watched it almost every year, at least once. Superman 2, I saw, like, because I had the Superman 1 on VHS, my parents had it, so that's why I watched it all the time. That was the only one we had. So I saw Superman 2, I think, when I was in, like, 7th grade, maybe, like, and it was only the end of it, like the fight scene with Zod, and it was on cable TV, like late at night when I was like channel surfing, and I caught like just that fight with Zod at the end, and that was it. That's all I saw for years. And then right before Superman Returns came out, they put them out on DVD. And I remember I heard that Superman Returns was going to be a sequel to Superman 2. So I got Superman 2 and then watched it then. So that was 2006, like right before that came out, like 2006. So that was the last time I saw Superman 2 was 2006. And my memory of it was almost non-existent. I think I might have fallen asleep through part of it when I watched it that first time. Then the Donner cut I saw in 2014. I had a shoulder surgery. I had a pretty serious sports injury on my shoulder. So I was in recuperating for that. And that's when I watched the Donner cut because my dad had it on DVD because I was at home and all I was doing was watching TV because I couldn't move my arm. And again, I was like so hazy from that I didn't remember too much of it. I remember thinking like it was better than what I remembered of Superman 2, but that was pretty much my only recollection of it. So like this week when I watched the two of them, I was basically going in fresh. I remember that he fought Zod, and I remember what they look like, and I remember there was the Niagara Falls scene, like where like he catches a kid falling off the edge of Niagara Falls, but that's pretty much it. So I was going in almost as fresh as you could going into this, So.
And yeah, again, I know we have so much
nostalgia. So for me, so the point I was getting to is like, I have no nostalgia to this movie because like my whole connection to Christopher Reeve and Richard Donner is that first movie. So this was like total fresh thing going in,
Okay. Good to know for sure.
Yeah.
Cause I definitely had that nostalgia for Superman. Like in my mind, I always kind of grouped 1 and 2 together, and I don't have the highest opinion of 3 and 4. And I actually rewatched.
They're awful.
I actually rewatched 4 recently, like late one night, and it was. We'll get to that on the podcast. But so I did have a little bit of that nostalgia, but it's interesting to hear your perspective. And so again, I know we have like so much to unpack, but would you? I know because again, I know you said you had a lot of thoughts. Do you want to share like what's your big picture takeaway from your rewatch?
Well, okay, obviously we won't know this at all because neither of us know Richard Donner personally, but even the Donner cut, I feel like is not a true representation of the movie he would have made, if I will say that. Cause like it's stuff that's kind of stitched together and like, it's just the stuff they had filmed. Like I can't believe the first movie that was so good and so emotional and so like rooted in like epicness would have ended with him just kind of like knocking Zod off a cliff. Like it's just, I mean, okay, my big thing is that the Donner cut's way better, like exponentially better. And the theatrical cut, I honestly don't know how the franchise wasn't killed after that movie, because it's like almost unwatchable. Like going back, like, I mean, I don't know how it was back then, but it's so corny compared to the first one, and it's just, there's so much like over the top campiness to it that it kind of bummed me out. I really don't like their portrayal of Clark Kent. Like he's so selfish and like, and mean spirited, and in both versions has a scene that I think is the most un-Superman like scene of all time ever been put to screen of anything. We'll get to that later, but both versions have it. So I don't know what was going on there, but yeah, it's definitely one of those things that, and I also think that Man of Steel, the Zack Snyder movie, is almost like it takes a lot from this movie. It's like almost like I'm going to do my version of this, which kind of like, it didn't make me like the Zack Snyder version less, but it made me feel like, oh, Zack wasn't doing a purely original thing. It was more like, because there were even shots like when he squares off against Zod, where they square off in a construction site, and it's almost that same shot where they're like it's like he cherry picked like images and like kind of did his version of it, which is like throughout the whole movie. We can get into that too, but like that, I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, I guess I don't even know what my main point was I was getting to. It was just like an explosion of opinions coming out there. I'm sorry.
You have nothing to apologize for, and I appreciate it. And I wanted to give you the floor for that, because I know, like for myself, like I did my rewatch right around New Year's, and we're recording this like late January. So it's been a few weeks for me of like, oh, like I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to record this. And, it's like, if you had said like, oh, I'm ready to record, like when I first reached out to you, if you were like, I'll do it today, like I would have done it. Like I was so ready to go. But I wanted to give you time to watch it. But, so I appreciate all of that. And yeah, I guess for anyone, I know it's pretty, I think relatively well known, certainly among the Superman fandom at this point, but I'll just give a real quick recap in case anyone is unfamiliar with the production history of this and what we're talking about. So Richard Donner was originally filming, and I know you know this, but for our audience, Richard Donner was originally filming Superman 1 and 2, not back to back, but simultaneously. So like when they were at the Daily Planet set, like they were filming scenes for both movies. But they eventually fell behind, and in order to make the Superman the movie release date, the decision was made to focus on just finishing Superman the movie. And hand in hand with that, and I'm not sure exactly who made this call, but the decision was made to take what was going to be the ending for Superman 2, Reversing Time, and make that the ending for the first movie. And that's how we got Superman the movie. Donner had a lot of tension with the producers, the Salkins, and despite him having already filmed a substantial portion of Superman 2, they replaced him with Richard Lester, who completed the movie. And for years, there was, I think, among the fandom, like there was this interest in like what Donner's version would have been. And then in the mid-2000s, around the time of Superman Returns, we finally got the Donner cut. And there's a great featurette that I watched like years ago on the DVD, and I caught a little bit of it on YouTube recently, that showed a little bit of the behind the scenes of how they assembled all of this. And it was literally tons of footage of film. And they had a whole team of editors that went through and cataloged everything. Michael Thau was the editor who like really, under the direction of Donner, but Thau was the one like really, doing the putting in the man hours on this. And so in 2006, they put out this Donner cut on DVD, and as they say, like it represents the Donner's original version for Superman 2, like as best they could put it together. So with the Donner cut, you have a mixture of scenes that Donner filmed, you have scenes that Lester filmed, and primarily the Kryptonians' path of destruction across Idaho and the battle in Metropolis that Donner had never been able to film, so he had to use what Lester filmed. But, and we'll get to this when we get to that portion of the movie, but they did edit it, and so a lot of the more like slapsticky bits came out.
So that end scene in the Fortress of Solitude, Donner didn't film any of that.
He filmed, so all the stuff with, so like Lester added a fight sequence to that showdown in the fortress. So like Superman ripping off the shield and like using it as like cellophane, and the holograms and the laser beams, like all that stuff was Lester, but the rest of it was Donner. Like
the conclusion of it?
Yeah. The thing with, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
And again, so with the Donner cut, so it's a mixture of footage, but we did get the reinsertion of scenes that Donner had originally filmed that then Lester refilmed. So we get a new opening, a new ending. All of the depowering and repowering is Donner footage, and Lois figuring out, or the final uncovering of the secret identity. That was all different.
Are you talking about when she shoots him?
Yeah.
I heard, I don't know if this is true, but I heard that was screen test.
That was the screen test. Yeah.
That they put in. Yeah. Yeah.
And you can tell.
Yeah. Cause they look different. Like Christopher Reeve looks younger, and like she looks like she doesn't have the same hairstyle or anything. Like it's very interesting to see that in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's like a snapshot of, like the major differences between the movie. And, we'll unpack a lot of that. But for anyone who is just like, I don't know what you're talking about, that's a little bit of the background. The other thing, just by way of setup, that I think is interesting is, we haven't seen the Snyder Cut of Justice League, right? But from what we can tell, it seems like it will be a very different movie than the theatrical cut in terms of runtime and, characters who were cut out of the film who are now back in. Superman will have the black costume. Like, it seems like it'll be different. These two versions, there are definitely differences, and I am with you. I do, with one exception, I do vastly prefer the Donner version, but they're not so different in the way that I think the Snyder Cut will be. They still all hit the same beats. It's just that things are executed a little differently.
That's true. I feel like the difference in this is more tone. Like the tone of this is like, it's like the same story, but like the tone of it is like you said, more serious, less slapsticky, cleaner. There's like a cleaner straight through story. But you're right. Like the Snyder Justice League, I think, is going to be like almost like a different story, like top to bottom. So it'll be interesting. Yeah,
for sure. So, and I would say, and tell me if you agree, I think if we had to like really pinpoint one thing, I mean, I agree big picture with the tone, but I guess getting more specific, like one thing that like really sets the movies apart and gives the Donner cut the edge. Do we agree it's Jor-El?
Yes. It's the whole sequence of why he loses his power, like that whole thing. Like, cause like, I think they're blurring together at this point for me, but yeah, Jor-El has a much bigger scene in like, it's more grounded and more rooted in the Donner cut. And then like, he also interacts with Lois too. Like Lois has the Superman shirt on, which I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So like, that's the thing. I mean, Marlon Brando had a dispute with the producers. And so, the footage that he had shot for Superman 2 was cut, and Lester reshot the depowering, that whole sequence with Lara instead. And it was, I guess we really do have to credit Superman Returns with this, because it was at that time that Warner Brothers worked things out with Brando's estate to use his likeness in Superman Returns. And they were also able to work things out for the Donner cut of Superman 2. So we got that back in.
On Jor-El, they used this line in Superman Returns as well in the trailer, where he's like, the son becomes the father and the father becomes the son. What does that mean? Because when I was watching it, I was like, this is supposed to have some profound impact, but like, this is like nonsensical. This line makes no sense with what's going on the screen. I think it's when he's like getting repowered up, and I'm like, wait, what? Like, I don't know. It's kind of like the Dark Knight thing about the hero we need. Like, it's like one of these lines. It's like, what? Like, what does that even mean? Like,
It's funny because when my son was born, I wrote this epic Facebook post, and I started it with that quote. The son becomes the father, and the father the son. And I think you can probably interpret it a number of ways. Like, just as an example, I know you don't follow the Supergirl TV show regularly, right? No. But this is not a major spoiler, but Martian Manhunter's father is introduced in the show at a certain point, and his mind is starting to go, and Jean has to care for him in the way that a parent would normally care for a child. And Kara offers that exact line of the son becoming the father and the father the son. So in kind of caring for each other and sort of flipping roles, I think that's one possible interpretation. I mean, I think.
What does that have to do with Superman getting his powers back?
Well,
like Jor-El's not like decrepit and like in a nursing home, and Superman has to take care of him. It's he's still helping Clark. Like I don't understand the correlation in it, So
I think in the case of Superman, it just sounds good, Ken. What do you want me to say? No,
I don't know.
No, I think in the context.
I'm sorry.
I think
Christopher Reeve is the best. I'm sorry.
No. And again, like, I'm not saying that the Supergirl thing applies here. I'm just saying, like, I think there are different ways that you can kind of interpret it. I think in the case of Superman 2, the Donner cut, you know, when Superman gives up his powers, you know, Jor-El says, this is permanent. There's no going back. And then, of course, he goes back like 2 scenes later. And Jor-El has to basically expend like all of his remaining like essence and the energy of the fortress in order to restore Superman's powers. And so I think it's like what was left of Jor-El kind of, you know, becoming part of Clark in order to restore the powers. That was how my interpretation of it.
Okay. Good. I'll take it. I'll take it.
But kind of on that note, like of Jor-El, I really think that that's what I really makes the Donner cut worth watching. And I think, you know, going back to Superman the movie, they do tie together, I think, a lot more, you know, thematically with Jor-El in there. So, you know, it's for anyone who hasn't seen the Donner cut, like it's worth watching at least for that, I think.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And like I said, I think it's a better, like, just experience in general. Like, even though there's the test footage in there, like I think it's a cleaner story. Like the whole Eiffel Tower thing at the beginning of the first movie. But are you a Harry Potter fan? Do you watch the Harry Potter movies?
No, I never got into them.
Anyone who watches Harry Potter, one of the terrorists, the Eiffel Tower, is Harry Potter's uncle, the one that puts him in the cupboard. Like, and then I noticed, I was like, oh my god, like it's the crazy uncle from Harry Potter. Yeah, and he's way younger. But yeah, dude, that. Oh, and how the theatrical cut opens with basically like a redo of the first movie, like just going through scene by scene. It's like, oof.
I mean, the Donner cut too, though, right? Like, has a pretty lengthy recap during the credits.
It's not as egregious. The Donner cut is something more like kind of like along the lines of what they did in Spider-Man 2, where they kind of brief kind of, but the theatrical cut is like you're watching the movie. Yeah. Like it's like a truncated version of it, but it's like whole scenes like stitched together. It's very strange. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, it's like right off the bat in the theatrical cut, like, you know, we revisit the imprisonment and banishment of Zod and Ursa and Nan, and, you know, they cut around Jor-El, and it's like, you know, we've seen this footage already in the first movie, and like now we're seeing it again, but like there's no Jor-El. And then even during that recap, like you see the hand of Jor-El like putting the crystal in, but it's like they couldn't actually show him. They show Lara, you know, carrying Kal-El, you know, through their home to the rocket. So, and again, like as a kid watching that, it wasn't something that I really noticed, but you know, watching it now, it's like, oh well, clearly this was, you know, where Jor-El would be. But yeah, very lengthy recap.
I mean, I like how in the Donner cut, how the Kryptonians are freed is the tie into the 2 rockets from that Lex shot off. Yeah, remember? And then in the theatrical cut, it's the terrorists attacking the French terrorists that are attacking the Eiffel Tower, and he saves that bomb and throws it out into space, and with some of the worst CGI I've ever seen, like it explodes, and like everything about the Donner cut felt more like it didn't feel as rushed. Let me put it that way. Like a lot of the special effects in the theatrical cut felt very rushed and not like they like took their time with it and like didn't try to make it look as awesome as possible. Like even some of the flying scenes, like I think when the Kryptonians land on the moon and they like wreck the guys on the moon, the Kryptonians, after they're free from their prison, they fly to the moon, and there's people from Earth that are like astronauts, like doing something like harvesting like space rocks or something. And they basically just tear them apart. And then they take off toward Earth, and in the Donner cut, they do this cool like camera turn where like when they fly, everything kind of spins around and like the whole perspective shifts, and like it's got like a very Star Wars kind of like motion thing to it. And then in the theatrical cut, they look like they're on strings being pulled off into the sky, and I'm just like, whoa, like it's nuts. It's nuts.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And I got to tell you, though, it drove me nuts. And I know this is, you know, nitpicky, I guess, but it drove me nuts that they were able to speak and there was sound in space during that, and gravity as well. When they pull they kill one of the astronauts, and like he falls to the ground, and then I think another point like they pull the flag out and they throw it and it falls. It's like
yeah. Well, also that the fact that Kryptonians are breathing in space, like what? Yeah. Like because like in modern, even in the cartoon, like Superman can't like travel in space like for long periods of time. Like he can't breathe in space in the comics, right? He can just kind of like short periods of time. He's able to, yeah. So, but you know, I don't think they were thinking that deeply about it, to be honest with you.
No, I'm with you though. So like, yeah, I even as a kid though, with Superman 2, I don't think I was ever really like a huge fan of that Eiffel Tower opening from the theatrical cut. It's honestly, it's rather tedious. It goes on like for quite some time.
Way too long. Yeah.
Like it's really long. And, you know, it's like, again, you know, Lois is there and, you know, Superman saves her, he foils the plot. Again, the bomb goes into space, like you said, and that's what frees them in the theatrical cut. But it's like, yeah, it's a real tedious scene. The Donner cut opening is great. I love that scene where Lois, you know, finally starts to put together that Clark and Superman are one and the same.
Yeah. And she like jumps out the window and then Clark like runs down and figures out a way to like stop her fall. But like he like blows the air up and then she bounces off the roof and then like she falls in like a watermelon truck and then he runs back up and it's like, Lois, what are you doing? Yeah. That was like a humorous, fun scene, but it wasn't slapstick. You know, it was that good tone, you know? Yeah.
And, you know, just as an, like two immediate examples that come to mind, just so people know like what I'm talking about when I say that, the Donner cut removed a lot of that slapstick style of humor. So like in that big battle in Metropolis, at a certain point, the Kryptonians start using their super breath against the crowd. And in the Donner, in the Lester cut, there's a lot more slapstick there. And in particular, like there's this one bit with the guy on the payphone, right? Like who's getting blown away, but like he's still trying to have his phone call. And it's like so goofy.
And there's like a guy with like an umbrella too, right? Like getting blown away with the umbrella. Yeah. And they add that in the Donner cut, it's Lois and Perry looking out the window, watching the destruction. And it's like, oh no, what's going, like, this is bad. Superman's in trouble. But in the Lester cut, it's like Lois and a woman who works the Daily Planet. And she's saying stupid stuff like, oh, that Kryptonians are like cuter than Superman or something, like something stupid stuff. And then Lois like elbows her and like, you know, like face palms her and stuff, just like really like slapsticky, like over the top. Like, yeah, for sure.
And then, you know, the Kryptonians, as they make their way across America, there's stuff that Donner took out for his cut. So, I mean, the immediate thing that comes to mind is in the Lester cut, they fly past Mount Rushmore and they use their heat vision to reshape the faces on Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
So like that's gone. So, you know, those are examples of stuff that like, you know, from sequences that Donner couldn't film, but he was able to remove that.
When they attacked the White House, was the Donner cut more long? Was it like more expanded out and more like visceral and violent? Because it felt longer, but maybe I just zoned out in the theatrical cut.
I didn't know. I don't know for sure. I don't think so, but I mean, it's possible. It's possible, but not that immediately comes to mind.
It felt like it, but again, maybe I probably zoned out at one point. There was definitely a part in the middle that in the theatrical cut that I totally zoned out with. Like I was like doing laundry at the same time, and like that whole part where they're going across the country, the Kryptonians, and because it's like kind of goofy in the theatrical cut. But in the Donner cut, they come off as scary. That's why I was wondering what the difference was, because they do come off as like scarier and more visceral and intimidating. Like I think Zod is really good in this. Like that actor who plays Terrence Stamp, and the other two too. I can't remember their names. The Ursa Nan, right? But like the actors, like I can't remember their names, but they all did a really good job.
Yeah, and I agree. Like I think they are more menacing in the Donner cut. But as far as like, you know, you kind of zoning out for a little bit. On that note, what did you think about the overall pacing of and I think this kind of applies to either cut, to be honest.
To both, yeah. It's way too long. Like not too long, but like things don't happen. Like, and it's very like dragged out. The whole plot of him. Can we talk about one of the things that I think is egregious, like so egregious to Superman, is him losing his powers.
Okay, on that note, let's take a 30-second commercial break. And then I think this is probably where we're going to spend the most of our time, because this was hands down the biggest problem. Either cut is the biggest problem I had. So let's just take 30 seconds and then we'll get into this. The Hive Comics and Games is an oasis of nerd fun and events in the heart of Odessa, Texas. Whether it's comic book superhero stories or role-playing in a dungeon, the Hive is where to be. Come tap your mana and face off against the top Magic the Gathering players in West Texas. Hive carries a majority of new comic titles each Wednesday and has all of your favorite titles in their back issue section. Follow them on Facebook at The Hive Comics and on Instagram at The Hive Comic Shop. Okay, so again, I assume people have seen Superman 2. If you haven't, the basic premise is that Superman gives up his powers to embark on a romantic relationship with Lois Lane while 3 Kryptonian criminals from the Phantom Zone wreak havoc across America. Superman losing his powers. Go.
Okay, first off, why does he need to give up his powers to be in a relationship with Lois? That's my first question right off the bat, is like, I don't get that, because like, I mean, I guess this was a long time ago, but like in the comics, he still has his powers. He's married to Lois. Like, I know this was filmed before all that happened, but like, it just like logically in my head just doesn't make sense why you jump to that conclusion. But I don't like it because it's a selfish thing that Superman does. He comes off as very selfish. And then once he loses his powers, like, so the thing to me about Superman is that the powers don't make him Superman. What makes him Superman is his heart, his spirit, and the values that his parents instilled in him. Right. So like in theory, in my head, in my Superman, if he didn't have powers, he would still be quote unquote Superman. Like if he lost his powers, he would still do everything he could to like help people and save people. Right. When he loses his powers in this movie, and this is the worst Superman thing I've seen across any media. Okay. Like worse than anything. Like if you think him snapping Zod's neck in Man of Steel is bad, this is so much worse, because that was done to protect people and to save a planet. And even though like he killed Zod, he saved planet Earth by doing it. And he immediately saved an immediate family. When he loses his powers, okay, him and Lois I can't even get through this out laughing. Him and Lois are driving back from the Fortress of Solitude in a car that they just miraculously get out of nowhere. They're on this desolate road in Canada, I think. I don't know, but they go to a truck stop, and there's like a diner at a truck stop. They go in the diner, and Lois is ordering a bunch of food, and Clark is like, oh, yeah, I'll be right back. Lois, I'm going to go use the restroom, right? This old man truck driver comes in to the bar, and everyone's like, oh, tough guys here.
Rocky, his name is.
This old ass man sits down next to Lois and starts hitting on her, right? And Lois just kind of like, you're gross. Like, don't talk to me. Clark comes out of the bathroom and then proceeds to do the most un-Superman-like thing ever. Is he starts like peacocking with the guy. He's like, hey, this is my seat, man. Someone needs to teach you manners, sir. And starts like acting as like he's like in 5th grade in like a playground. Like Superman would be like, okay, Lois, let's like if the guy, like, he comes out of the bathroom and this old man truck driver is like, hey, Four Eyes. Like, he starts like making fun of Clark, right? For some reason. And Superman, real Superman, the one that we know, he would have been like, oh, right on. Okay, dude. Lois, let's go sit over here. End of story. Like, would never. Clark like instigates a fight with this guy. This old man. He instigates a fight with this old man. Tells him to come outside. He's like, don't make fun of me in front of Lois. I'm gonna teach you some manners. And like literally picks the guy up. The guy then punches him in the face. And then all of a sudden, it's like he's like in a wrestling match from WWE with blood pouring down his face after like one punch and an elbow to the stomach. He's got like blood just like gushing out of his face. And it's horrible. And then they see that like, and then Lois is like, he's like on the ground bleeding. And the old man truck driver goes back to eating his like steak and eggs or whatever the hell. And Lois is like, Clark, are you okay? And he's like, oh, he's like coughing up blood for some reason. And he's like, oh no, Lois. And she's like, and she says something to the effect of, I want the man I fell in love with. And he's like, oh, I wish he was here, Lois. I wish he was here. I'm like, what? Like, this is so like not Superman. Like I want to hear your opinions on this, but the cherry to top it all off is the coda at the end of the movie, which, oh my God. Okay. Just
which in the Donner cut makes no sense.
It's
at
still
all.
there, which oh my God, this whole scene doesn't make sense, but what are your opinions on this?
Okay. And I think to me, like, this is like, I have so many thoughts on the whole, giving up of the powers and the aftermath and the way it's depicted in both cuts. And your reenactment was amazing and hilarious and 100% like all the stuff that I was thinking as I was watching it. But let me say this. My whole problem with Superman 2, especially with respect to him giving up his powers, this goes back to the larger problem that I have with the Christopher Reeve movies across the board. as much as I love him as Superman, and he's a magnificent actor. But I don't subscribe to this notion of the character where Superman is who he is and Clark is just this disguise. And
agreed.
And even there's, once Lois, he reveals himself to Lois and they're in the fortress and they're having dinner, she asks him about the dual identity. And he's like, I really like being Clark, even though I do make a fool of myself sometimes. And it's like, it is an act for, did you watch Kill Bill?
I've never seen it, but I know the phrase you're referring to.
The speech, right? In Kill Bill Volume 2, Bill goes on this whole rant about Superman and how Clark is meek and bumbling and ineffectual because that's how Superman views humanity. And he compares Superman to Spiderman, for example, where, Peter Parker wakes up, or Spider-Man wakes up, he's Peter Parker. He has to put on a mask and he becomes Spider-Man. Whereas Superman is Superman. He was born Superman and he puts on the glasses and he becomes Clark. And he adopts this whole persona because that's how he views humans. I mean, it's a very dark, cynical way of looking at it. And I've never really subscribed to that.
No, that notion is ridiculous because that's not, Superman's not a dark character.
Right.
Superman's not like he's not a godlike figure that watches over humanity like that. Like, I agree with you. I don't subscribe to that either. And I think it's probably comes of Smallville. Like I've said, Christopher Reeve is my favorite in the suit, but my favorite depiction of the character overall is definitely Tom Welling from Smallville. Cause that is the core to me of who he is that he is Clark Kent. And when he becomes Superman, it's like when a doctor puts on their scrubs kind of thing, right? It's like his work clothes, or like a construction worker puts on their hard hat. It's like when he goes to work, this is what he wears to work, or like a soldier putting on their uniform going into battle. That's to me what the Superman identity represents to him. It's like a public face to protect who he really is, which is Clark Kent. And you're right. I don't like the notion of the Christopher Reeve Donner interpretation of he has Superman and Clark is a persona. Now, in my head, the Clark Kent, the Daily Planet, is a little bit of a disguise going on there. But I feel like it's more of him than still what Superman is, if that makes sense.
Right. No, I mean, I agree with everything. And again, going back to the Kill Bill thing, it's like, there's really no version of the character that we've seen that I think supports, Quentin Tarantino's version. But this whole, it does resonate a little bit with me. Again, I don't think, Superman's intention is to be mocking humanity. But that is the biggest problem that I have with the Donner movies. And I know, again, we grew up reading comics in the Byrne era, right? The version of the character that Byrne established, where Clark is who he is and Superman is what he can do. And that's what we saw in Lois and Clark. And that's what Smallville was all about. And, to your point, I was thinking about this as I was reflecting on how much it bothers me the way Clark is depicted in the movies. And it's why does it bother me so much? And I think it really, in large part, is Smallville. Because it's we spent 10 years with Clark Kent. And the idea that, that's how Clark would be, it just doesn't, ring true for me. And I know it's a different take, it's a different interpretation, but I've never liked it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's not something I hate, but I like you said, it's a different interpretation. But I do think it is one of the reasons why I connect with the Snyder version so much, is because I know those movies are dark and can be oppressive at times, in terms of the tone they give, but his view of Superman as being just a dude who just happens to be able to do great things. When he's Superman in those movies, he does act more shielded and more reserved, as if he's not relaxed. But when he is Clark, especially in Man of Steel, he is more who he is at rest is who he normally is. So that is one of the things that I do better, why I think I connect with those movies. But yeah, dude, this whole depowering, the whole thing top to bottom just doesn't ring true to Superman, because it's operating from a very selfish place, right? Superman's all about the selflessness. He's all about doing for others more than doing for himself. And I feel it's so intrinsic to who he is and what he wants that he would never want to make I don't think there should be this. I know people have talked in the past on podcasts and stuff, like Kevin Smith and stuff, about there was a script for a Superman movie in the early 2000s going around where he's in a psychiatrist's office talking about how he wants to do more things for himself and stuff. And to me, Superman would never even need that. Like he wouldn't have this like this inherent need to be like, I just want to do things for myself and I'm sick of doing things for other people. Like it's so like baked into his DNA that to be like a selfless person, that like the whole thing just doesn't ring true to me. And like I don't understand why he can't be in a relationship with Lois if he has his powers. That doesn't make any sense. Like I don't know.
No, I'm with you. It's you know, and so it plays out. But anyway, I just want to kind of button up the last thing. And so I think, you know, the way that Clark is treated in these movies, like really just as a disguise. I think that's why like we have that scene in the diner, because it's like he doesn't know how to be like Clark is nothing. You know what I mean? Like once the powers are gone, like and you know, again, this, I know I've said this to you and I've said this on other podcasts, but like my least favorite aspect of Superman, the movie, is this idea that like he goes to the fortress for like 15 years and then he comes out and he's Superman. And it's like, you know, I much prefer the version like we've gotten in the comics and in Birthright, right? Like he's traveling the world. He's actually living in the world. He's having experiences as opposed to like just being taught / programmed by Jor-El. And I feel like that kind of leads, like it's almost a natural consequence of like once he doesn't have those powers and costume and he's not Superman, he's like it all just falls apart. But anyway, I think it's worth noting. There's so many aspects to this, but one that applies to either cut, right? Superman does not discuss this with Lois. He just makes whether he's talking to Lara in the theatrical cut or Jor-El in the Donner cut, like he takes it upon himself that it's like, okay, I'm going to divest myself of these powers. I'm going to be human after one date.
Yeah. Yeah. Very strange. And the other thing about like the concept of him losing the powers, like while I don't love it, like in general with superhero stories, when they do those episodes or issues or whatever, when they lose the powers and they have to like, I'm like, I'm not interested. Like I'm here to watch a superhero story. Like I don't care about them like struggling without the powers, but in general, like that story in a Superman movie, it could have been like, it could have done, like, I get the desire by the filmmakers to want to do it, because contrasting him losing his powers with the Kryptonians coming in and him having to like find a way to get the powers back, that is in many ways could be a very interesting story. How it's done though is like he loses his powers, he gets his ass kicked by this old truck driver man, and then goes right back and gets the powers. It's not like this narrative thread through the movie, so it doesn't make any sense why it's there. Like he could have easily just been like having a date with Lois in like the middle of like, I don't know, like the Sahara or something, taking her to like all these exotic places, and like he just wasn't watching the news, and that could have been why he wasn't around. You know what I mean? Like it was so short and like such a non sequitur, and they end it with this awful coda at the end of the movie, which is the most un-Superman like thing ever. And sorry, this makes me so mad. Like after he defeats the Kryptonians, after all the shit goes down, after he like saves the day, he comes back to this diner and like messes with this old man again. And he beats the shit out of this old man and throws him down the table and wrecks the whole diner. I'm like, dude, you're Superman. Like, why do you care about this hillbilly old man truck driver? Like, you're Superman. Like, this makes no sense. It's such a like a bully and like mean spirited like way to end. It's like the end of the movie. Like I don't get it. Like it's one of those things where I'm just scratching my head that I don't understand.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, to jump to the end, I mean, in the Donner cut, Superman reverses time, which is my other massive problem with the Donner cut in particular. And we can get to that. But so he reverses time. So like Clark getting beat up never happened, yet he still goes back to the diner and teaches that guy a lesson.
Yeah.
For something that never happened. That's real problematic. But
no, but even in the theatrical cut, it makes no sense, because it's like again, going back to the Zod in Man of Steel, him killing Zod, like that is it's something he truly does not want to do. He's racked with guilt over it, but he has to do it to save the planet and save not even the planet, just like a family, an innocent family right in front of him. He needs to do this to like save these people, right? This is like even if we go with the fact that he doesn't erase time and he did beat up Clark Kent, he's going back and starting a fight. Like Superman shouldn't start fights. Like that's something that like is just so not like superheroes in general should never like instigate fights, right? But like Superman, like he beats, this is like this old guy probably had a heart attack and died. Like it's like he was an old man. Like dude, it's so infuriating. Like,
and you know, people hold up the Donner movies as these beacons of hope. You know, we've mentioned the Snyder movies a few times, and I feel like it's especially worth mentioning here because this does kind of grinds my gears a little bit. As we discussed when we talked about Snyder, right? Like one of the criticisms is that, you know, they're darker and like Superman doesn't display the hope and optimism and heroism that you would normally expect from him, right? And I think oftentimes the comparison is made to the Donner movies. And it's like, as we discussed at length, right? Clark's main conflict in the Snyder movies is that he just wants to do the right thing. He wants to help people, but he has everyone in the world around him, like doubting him, questioning him, projecting their hopes, their fears, like all this stuff, calling him into Congress to testify. Like, all he wants to do is help people. That's his conflict, right? In this movie, his conflict is like he just wants to get laid and he doesn't want to be Superman anymore. Like, so like, I don't know. To me, it's just like, I don't get it. It's like, yeah, the Donner Superman smiles more and the costume's brighter and, you know, maybe the music kind of pumps you up a little more, although we love the Hans Zimmer music in the Snyder movies. But it's like, I don't know. I mean, the presentation is different. It's like, but aesthetically one is lighter, but I really feel like when you're talking about capturing the heroism of the character.
Oh, it's not night and day, man. Like that scene in Man of Steel when he's like under the gravity terraformer thing and he's like being crushed by the weight of it. And he's like just kind of like pushing himself up and you can feel like he's like digging down deep and he's like giving everything he has to stop this. And in this, like, he like plays mind games with Zod, like, oh, I'm gonna step in this chamber, and like it's such an anticlimactic. And then Zod is powerless. Like Superman doesn't need to kill him at that point. He's powerless. Like he is straight up powerless by like all the Kryptonians in this, by this rationale, they're straight up powerless. Like they're normal people. Superman could, in theory, lock them up, bring them to a prison, throw them in prison. They're never getting out. They wouldn't even know what's going on. They'd have no concept of what happened, right? But no, he crushes his hand, knocks him into like the vat of whatever. Like it's so nebulous what happens, but he dies. He kicks him down into like this endless pit in the Fortress of Solitude. Non jumps to his death because for reasons I don't know why.
He tries to fly. He tries to fly, and he just
that's what he was doing. Yeah. Oh, I thought he was just like
no, he tries and
oh, okay. And then Ursa, right?
Yeah.
Ursa, yeah. Lois like is like, you're a bitch, and like slaps her and pushes her off the side. She dies, and then Superman's like, all right, Lois, and like high fives her or something like that. And it's just like, this is so like weird. Like it felt like the first Christopher Reeve movie to me feels like a masterpiece. Like it is like, while the special effects may not hold up super well, and like you said, like your interpretation of the character may vary, it's still done with like the utmost of like truth and like veritas to the movie, right? Like it's like it just feels like Donner and the writers like really broke down like, for this moment in time, what would be the realest, most optimistic, truest version of what this character would be. And this one just feels so like half thought out and like rushed, and like it counteracts itself. Like it's not like, I used to tell people that the first two are the only good Christopher Reeve movies, but really it's only the first one, because like the second one is not like, it doesn't hold up. Like I don't know.
No, I mean that's the thing. Like whereas rewatching the Snyder movies, I was like, wow, I really appreciate them in a more meaningful way than I ever did before. Rewatching this one was a bit of a letdown, I'm not gonna lie, and it was kind of like I had this weird disconnect, because it's like I never watch any movie wanting to dislike it, right? And so like, I kind of went into this like, oh, this will be fun to revisit and compare the two cuts, and like watching both of them, I'm like, things that we've talked about and things we'll get to that I think like really just didn't work and didn't resonate. And then again, going back to the pacing, like it's like not much happens for like, it's deep into the movie before like it really gets going.
Yeah, but even the end fight is like a low speed chase where they're like throwing rocks at each other. Like it's not like an interesting, and again, a lot of that has to do with the time period. Like I get that. Like I don't want people listening to this to be like, oh, it was made in the 70s, like cut it some slack. It's like, yeah, Star Wars was also made in the 70s. And like, while you can see the seams of the special effects in Star Wars, it still holds up in the fact that it's still exciting and interesting. Like Empire Strikes, I think this came out around the same time as Empire Strikes Back. I think this movie. But it's like there's just like it just feels like half-assed. Like that's the only way I can like think of it, you know. And the Donner cut, to be fair, like I said, had Donner directed that movie, I don't think that even close would be what that movie would be, because like you said, they just like he didn't go back and reshoot anything. It was more like they just kind of found the footage and kind of chopped together what they had and kind of built it around what already existed. So it's not really even truly like what the Donner cut would be. Like I really don't think that old man truck driver scene would be in the Donner cut. I just can't see that being.
No, but those were Donner scenes.
The one where at the end of the movie where he throws him down. Oh, man. Okay. Yeah.
So that's but you know, I know it was, you know, there was a lot about like the reviewing that, you know, the rewatch that was, you know, was disappointing. Cause again, like I had always held it up a little bit more in my head, but you know, let's jump back to the depowering. Cause like, to your point, like the sequence of events is honestly, it's comical where whether it's Jor-El or Lara in either version, it's like, once you do this, there's no going back. And he's like, I've made up my mind. This is my path now. Immediately the next scene, he gets his ass kicked and he's like, I regret this. I regret this instantly. And then he goes back and does the thing that they told him was completely impossible. And he gets his powers back. It's like, all right. And to your point is very, is a really important one. And I couldn't agree more. Like, I think there's a way where this story could have been more interesting. I mean, maybe if early in the movie, like you see some instance where like he laments not being able to have more of a normal life, or he feels put upon in terms of all of the demands of saving people. Like something, like you said, that kind of like threads this narrative through a bit more, as opposed to like, it really just kind of comes out of nowhere and is over real fast. Cause it's like, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
You know? And so, and as far as like giving up the powers, I agree. Like that is real difficult to wrap my head around, especially since, you know, in the post-crisis era, and I guess maybe we can chalk this up to, it was a different era, right? And a different view of the character. But like, you know, we've seen now in the comics, Superman married with a kid. You know, we saw him in a relationship in Lois and Clark, on Smallville, the new Superman and Lois TV show, like all these instances where, no, like he can be a hero and a journalist and a husband and a father. Like he's allowed to do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, yeah, you're right. This movie did come out, I believe, pre-crisis.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 1980.
Yeah. So I guess there was that, like the playbook that they were operating off was probably the 1950s Superman comics, if we're being honest, right? Like if because I've heard Donner was a pretty big Superman fan. So I'm assuming the comics that he was trying to recreate were the ones from the 40s and the 50s. Like I really doubt the guys making this movie were like reading the current issues in the 70s. You know what I mean? Like He was probably tying back to what they knew of the character from the 40s and 50s and maybe early 60s. So like there is that to contend with. But at the same time, that first movie was so grounded in reality. Like that's why I don't understand this jump that they make that, well, he can't be in a relationship and be a superhero at the same time. When the first movie was all about like, dude, the first movie with his dad, this goes back to the old man truck driver once again, when he doesn't have his powers. But that first movie, when he's getting picked on in high school by the football players, right? And and they're like, oh, you still got to clean up all our pads that we knocked over. And, you know, you lame water boy, like, yeah, weakling, like all this stuff they're implying, right? They drive off and we're assuming at super speed, cleans everything up. And then he starts running at super speed and races them home and beats them home. And then he's like, kind of like cockily sitting there in the car. And he's like, oh, I ran. Like, he's like kind of showing off, right? Like he's showing his stuff. That's cool. That's like him, like flaunting without like
abusing
these
it.
people. Yeah. Right. But even then his dad is like, cause he drives away and his dad gives him that great speech about like, you're here for a reason. Like just because you have the ability to do this doesn't mean you should like show off. Like, and that was so grounded. Like you understood exactly why someone as good as Superman would exist, because like, just from that one little scene, like, and that it just felt like all that was thrown out in this movie. And that's why I have such a problem with him, like giving up his powers. Cause it's like that scene that you get from it is, and the coda of it that doesn't jive with that from the first movie, you know, like, I don't know.
Yeah. No, well said. I mean, it's other than the reversing time in the Donner cut, like the whole depowering, like is by far my biggest issue with either version of Superman 2. And you know, again, I mentioned before, you know, not talking to Lois about it, and you know, it's especially curious because like in these movies, she's infatuated with Superman, does not think much of Clark. I mean, there are moments where she's, you know, she's not unkind to him, but you know, it's almost more of like a pity. Like she does offer some, you know, some concern for Clark, but it is like almost more in a pitying way. Like she's infatuated with Superman. So it's kind of baffling to me that Superman would think like, oh, well, if I give up my powers, like this will be great. Like, you know, I don't know. I think that's a big leap. And going back to not talking to her about it, it's like you're engaged to lovely Laura, and I look forward to a post-pandemic world where we can all do a double date again. And I would assume that like on your first date or prior to your first date, it came up that you're an artist, you're a comic book artist, right? Mm-hmm. It would be like if after your first date, you came home and like you broke all your pencils and you smashed your drawing table and you were like, guess what? Nothing, no other demands on my time. Like I'm not an artist anymore. And it's like, I'm sure, you know, I would have to imagine like one of the things that she's drawn to, no pun intended, drawn to you for is your creativity, your passion for art. Right. So it's like, that would be such a weird, such a weird choice to make. And I feel like that's what he does here.
Yeah, it is baffling. It's crazy. And dude, I feel like she'd be weirded out if that was the case, right? Like it'd be like, what? Like, yeah. I mean, this is another thing that I kind of butt up against, but I think this again has to do more with the time period that they were basing these comics, this movie off of was the stories from the 50s and 60s. But I don't like Lois that is fawning over Superman and like is not interested in Clark. Like, I actually really hate that because it makes Lois sorry, oh my god. So
well, we just said her name and they're both L's. I mean, you know.
Yeah, no, but it makes Lois look like shallow and vapid and stupid. Like, and it's one of these things that like I respect the character so much more than that. And like I personally think it's more interesting if Lois falls in love with Clark and not Superman, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think like that and that's something that was done like way later in the comics, of course, but it's just one of those things looking back on these movies that is one of those things that to me quite doesn't hold up as well, because it's like it doesn't ring as true to the character from that I've read in more recent times, I guess, you know.
And so we also have to talk about the sequence of events because they're different in the Lester and Donner cuts. And I think that, you know, to your question about like, why does he have to give up his powers? I think this kind of plays out differently in the two different versions. So in the theatrical cut, he gives up his powers. And again, it's not Jor-El because we don't have Marlon Brando's footage here, but it's with Laura, and it happens before they consummate their relationship. The implication being, and I think this is how most people have taken it, is that he, as an alien or as a superpowered being, couldn't have sex with her unless he gave up his powers and became human. And I mean, I don't know if that was the intention, but I feel like that's kind of the takeaway from that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't really think about that. I did notice that in the theatrical cut, there was this very like weird 70s like silver bed that was just like hanging out in the forest, which was bizarre, right? Like I was like, this like ugh.
So, you know, but so like that was kind of now that colors things a little bit differently. Like for argument's sake, let's say that was the intention, right? And, you know, my fellow Smallville fan here, remember they played with that idea on Smallville for a long time, right? Remember like Clark and Lana had sex when he lost his powers in season 5. And then when he got them back a few episodes later, those activities ceased because, and he confided in Chloe that he was like, he couldn't do that with his powers. Yeah. And it wasn't until way later, like with season 9, like when he was with Lois and he was fine. Like when there was the episode, the Silver Banshee episode where like he and Lois and Oliver and Chloe like go to like a cabin, like a bed and breakfast sort of thing.
Oh, I vaguely remember that. Yeah.
And like he's talking with, and Chloe says something to the effect of like, oh, like I thought like you weren't able to do that with human women or something. And he was like, no, like I've been, you know, training with Jor-El, like I can control my powers now. But I feel like that idea came from Superman 2. That's always been my takeaway, is that it happened in that order. Again, it's not explicitly said, like, you can't have relations with a human woman. But I kind of always took it that way. Now, that colors things a little differently. It's almost more understandable. He's like, listen, you know, I want to be able to do this.
yeah, that does. But in the Donner cut, it's the reverse.
In the Donner cut, it's the reverse. And this, I think, answers, again, it's not an answer I subscribe to, but I think this does answer your question of like, well, why can't he have a relationship and be Superman? Like, Jor-El goes on this whole thing about like, yours is a higher calling. You can't serve humanity if your attentions are divided and you're in this relationship. Like, that's the way it's presented. Now, again, like, I strongly disagree with it, but like, that's the track that they chose for this.
I mean, okay, we're going to go off a slight detour, but Superman Returns, I haven't seen it in so long, but Superman Returns is like a quasi sequel to Superman 2, right?
Yeah.
And isn't it implied that kid that Lois has is his kid from that night?
Mm-hmm.
They slept together?
Yeah.
That's what's implied? Okay.
Which, regardless of which cut you're talking about, is real problematic, because, so it is a detour, but I think it's a valid one to go on given what we're talking about. So like, yeah, like Bryan Singer has said that, he viewed Superman 2, right, as a quasi-sequel to the first 2 Superman movies. He was ignoring 3 and 4, right? But it was sort of set within the same continuity of the first 2 movies. And Lois's kid is Superman's, right? And presumably conceived during this period of time that we're talking about in Superman 2, unless we're supposed to believe that they had another encounter, you know, that we never saw. But it's like, either if you're dealing with the Lester cut, right, where he erases her memory of his secret with the kiss, right, she'd really be scratching her head. Or if you're going with the Donner cut where he reverses time, it never happened. So it's like, either way, it's like real screwy. I don't know how that really lines up.
Superman Returns is like an abysmal movie. Like, I don't even want to get down the rabbit hole of that, but it was just like that. I was just trying to because like I was wondering, because I remember when I saw Superman Returns, I couldn't remember where that kid came from. I wasn't sure if that was something. So, but that makes sense, that it ties into it. Okay, gotcha.
But anyway, so like in the Lester cut, he gives up his powers through this conversation with Lara before they consummate their relationship, presumably implying that he had to do that in order to be with her in that way. And then the Donner cut, right, flips it, where that does make it more interesting, and it makes it more like ideological, right? It's not that you literally can't be with her. It's like you could physically have a relationship with her, but it's this idea of like, well, again, like yours is a higher calling. You can't split your attention. Like it's all or nothing. I will say, from an acting standpoint, I really did enjoy that scene between Christopher Reeve and the Marlon Brando head.
Oh, totally. Yeah. No, Christopher Reeve, I feel like I've been bagging on this so much but like, I want this to be said that Christopher Reeve is like money in every scene he's in, even like in the things that like I disagree with, like in terms of like the things that for me don't ring true to the character. It's still, for what he's doing, he's amazing in this movie. Like, he sells everything, and you know, like he's great. There's a reason why I say he's my favorite Superman in the suit, you know? So
yeah. No, absolutely. And that scene with Jor-El, like, it's a powerful scene, and you really like the Christopher Reeve performance. I mean, like, you really feel, you know, how he's torn, and you feel the frustration, and he's like, you know, haven't I like done enough for them, you know, for the people of Earth? Although at the same time, it's like, buddy, we're only on Superman 2. You know, it's like, come on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, that's one of those things that like I as a fan, like I disagree. Like, Superman would never even like that thought to me would never cross Superman's mind. But like, for what is given, like, Christopher Reeve is awesome, man. Like, he sells that, like, what's happening, you know?
Yeah. So. And then so yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think either way, like, it's real tough to wrap your head around. And I do think, had kind of the seeds for this been planted, you know, more so throughout the movie, I think this could have been like a more interesting arc. But it kind of, again, it all happens like within a span of these few scenes. And, you know, I echo your frustrations with that first diner scene. The thing that made me laugh during it, though, is that, like, I know the guy pushes him through like the glass at one point, and I guess that would mess you up, but like, he gets back up after that. And then the guy, like,
he's got one cut after he gets pushed through the glass. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the guy, like, punches him in the stomach and like pulls his hair back, and then like Clark looks like he's gonna die after that.
No, it's like literally like 1989 WWF like blood like just pouring down his face, and it's like, what is going on here? Like, yeah,
I don't know. And so, did you ever watch Arrested Development? I don't know. So it's a completely separate note, but it was
long time ago, yeah.
So there's this running bit where a number of the characters, but particularly Jason Bateman's character, Michael, like at various points, they'll make a choice that they instantly regret. And they're like, I've made a terrible decision. And it's like, that's the same thing here. It's like instantly, it's like this guy is so gung ho about his new life. And then it's like instantly the next scene, he's like, I have to go back.
But okay. But the other thing that like, don't you think not Superman, Christopher Reeve as Clark Kent, don't you think he would have been able to take that guy? Like that's the thing. Like he like, I don't get why this like that's what was another thing that made no sense. It wasn't like this like badass like tough looking guy that came in. It was like an old man like with like smoking a cigarette and like Clark, he's in the prime of his life. Like he should be able to like at least handle himself a little bit. Like I'm not saying he wins the fight or anything, but like he like gets his he takes a worse beating in that fight than he takes with Zod later on in the movie. Like it's crazy. Like
I mean, like, do we chalk it up to the fact that, you know, like later in this movie he will fight Zod and Ursa and Nan, but like prior to this, I don't think he's ever been in a fight. A fist fight. Yeah. I mean,
that's true. You're right. That's something. Yeah, you're right.
But it's like you try a little bit. That was the other thing. It's like he mostly just stood there. It's like try something. I don't know. You know. And then he goes to get his powers back. He walks back.
He walks with his bell bottom swaying in the wind. Back with like, did you come here with a car? Like, where did that car go that you miraculously got?
Yeah, the car comes out of nowhere, and then, you know, presumably Lois takes it, but she couldn't drive him back? Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
But so he goes back to the fortress, and then, you know, the Lester cut, like, they give you nothing. Like, he just sees the green crystal, right? And then it's implied that that's able to repower him, and that's it, but you don't get anything else. Whereas the Donner cut gives us that whole sequence with Jor-El, which the Jor-El thing made me laugh, because in the first scene, when Superman wants to give up his powers, Jor-El is like, I anticipated this, my son. I knew this might come, and if you do this, there's no going back. Then he goes back, and Jor-El's like, I anticipated this, my son. But there's only one way. And that's when he has to like expend the rest of the energies of the fortress. And we see him, like Jor-El emerges, right? Like it's not just the floating head. Like we actually see him walk toward Clark, and they kind of become one. And I thought that was cool. But again, just still kind of a little goofy.
Yeah. I mean, like backseat driving, I'm just thinking in my head, like so many ways that whole like sequence could have been more like impactful, you know, like if like he had to have given up his powers for some reason, like, you know, like a selfless act or something. Like, I don't know, just that's a whole nother rabbit hole we can go down. But what did you, just to switch topics here, what did you think about the portrayal of Zod and Ursa and Nan in this? Because I actually think they were really good for the time period and what they were doing. I actually think they held up in both versions really well.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, and especially when we lost again, like some of the goofier aspects, you know, with the Donner version, you know, that kind of did away with some of that. Yeah, I mean, no, overall, I mean, it's funny too, like, you know, one of the reasons I was so happy, like watching Smallville with Annette O'Toole as Ma Kent was like, wow, I saw her as Lana Lang in the Superman movies, and you know, in this case, I think it sort of worked in the reverse, where it's like, you know, now we spent all this time with Terrence Stamp as the voice of Jor-El. Like, it was so cool, like, you know, going back and, you know, and seeing him in this. So, no, I thought they worked well. I thought they were effective as villains. Yeah,
I thought Terrence Stamp was really good because he, like, you could tell he was taking it super seriously. Like, unlike, like I don't, again, like Gene Hackman, like, I don't know, like, per se, like his take on Lex isn't like my favorite. Like it is kind of like over the top and like a little like arch, I guess, you know what I mean? But I loved how Terrence Stamp was like just grounded and like he was like, he felt like regal almost, but like he was taking it super seriously. And like, I thought he was very intimidating and very well done. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. So that was cool. And I'm just trying to think. Oh, I mean, we touched on this, but as far as the way in which Lois figures out that Clark is Superman, right? So that's a major difference between the two cuts. Whereas in the Lester cut, they're in the hotel at Niagara Falls, and Clark trips and his hand goes into the fire and he's unscathed, and she figures it out.
I want to ask you, that hotel that they're in the Lester cut, is that a place you would ever want to ever spend any time in your entire life?
No,
because because I was looking at this freak show of a room that they're in, and I was like, how could this be at all considered like luxury or like appealing to anyone? And I'm chalking it up to the 70s, but like I was like, this is like the weirdest looking hotel room I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, for sure. But so we have that in the Lester version, and then in the Donner cut, like you said, right, that was a scene that Donner never got to film. So they used the original screen test between Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve, where Lois, pretends to shoot Clark, and it turns out they're blanks. But Clark's reaction reveals his true identity. I mean, I think we kind of graded on a curve, right? The fact that they only had the screen test to work with. But which version did you like better?
Oh, definitely the Donner version for sure. Like even with it being a screen test, it still came off as really good. And I thought it showed the acting range of both of them really well. Like, so you could totally understand why they got the jobs, because you saw both Clark Kent and Superman in that scene, and Lois, like it was really good. So that was for sure much better. The Niagara Falls thing, man, is just the hotel room with the fire. He trips in the fire. It's like, yeah.
The one thing that I did like about that though was, he gets up, right, and he's like, I can't believe I did that. And Lois is like, well, maybe you wanted to. And he's like, no, I don't think I did. And she's like, well, maybe not with your mind, but with your heart. I like that little bit. But yeah, overall, I think the screen test sequence, was a lot more fun. Yeah, which had like a lot more energy to it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So he gets his powers back, right? Again, with the Donner cut, you actually see that play out, whereas with the Lester cut, it's just, he picks up the crystal, and then, the rest is up to your imagination. It did bum me out that in the Donner cut, they didn't use the General, would you care to step outside line? Because I did like that.
Yeah, you're right. You didn't. No.
I did like that. And then, although I don't know, did you like that? Because that plays off of the diner scene. That whole thing. Because I think that's what.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I never put that dot together. I mean, that's like an iconic line, I think, from Christopher Reeve when he says that. But see, it makes sense in that scenario though, because Superman's the one who's like outgunned, and he's like,
right,
he's protecting people. Like he's not bullying someone. Can
we? No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I do like that line. I do wish they kept that for the Donner one, but
that was one of the only instances where I was like, oh man, like, you should have kept that. So I want to hear your thoughts on the battle. I'll say this, that again, I like the Donner version that excised the sillier bits. I thought that for, the standards of, 1970s filmmaking, I thought that for the most part, like it was a solid enough fight sequence.
It was slow paced. That was my problem with it. It was very slow paced. Like, and that's not that's not like a 70s thing. Like, I feel like it's just like they let the camera linger too much on like slow moving things.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. The thing that really made me laugh is the bit with the bus, right? So there's that point. I think it's Ursa and Nan who pick up the bus full of people. And first of all, again, we love Christopher Reeve. I don't mean to knock any performance, but his when he's like, don't do it, the people. Like the delivery just made me laugh there. And the idea that they would even care. But, I appreciated his passion there, right? Superman's pleading with them. But they throw the bus towards Superman, and it collides with him. And like, he's out of commission for like a really long time. I mean, it's like maybe a full minute, which in screen time is like a long time. Everyone thinks he's like, the people on the street are like, oh no, Superman's dead. And he's like out for that bus, like really gave him a hard time.
Yeah, I mean, that was another shout out in Man of Steel, I think, because that same thing happens in Man of Steel, and he just kind of hops over it. Do you remember that scene where like Zod throws like a tanker at him, and it felt very much like a shot for shot, except he just kind of like hops over it effortlessly, and like, it explodes in the background, and like makes that huge like Die Hard kind of looking scene with this fire behind him. But you're right. The bus. Well, I think this was the Donner cut. I can't remember if this was in the Lester cut or not. But when he goes underground and they fight underground, do you remember this?
Yeah. I think that's in both. I think it's in both.
Okay, because that to me is where like your imagination runs. Like they're having this bombastic, epic fight because like the ground shaking and you're hearing this like just vicious like pow and attacks and like all this, and they pop back up and they're like back to like throwing like slow motion like rocks at each other. Like it's funny. But again, I guess that has to do with the time period, I know. But then I go back to Empire Strikes Back and Luke and Vader fighting, like that doesn't feel slow or boring. Like I don't know. I think that they didn't put enough thought into the fight scene.
And that's, an instance where like, I'd be real curious to see, what Donner would have filmed, what if anything would have been different. And I don't, it's like, it's a sort of thing where, well, because I was going to say like, it would have been cool like if they had more of a budget for this and they could have done an animated version, for example, like for, so because obviously they weren't, they couldn't film anything new, but like if they had done like an animated sequence. But I don't know, like I appreciate what they were able to do with what they had to work with. We haven't mentioned Lex at all in this. Oh,
who's apparently is a Liberace fan. Did you catch that?
Oh, with the record at the beginning?
Yeah. I was like, that's such a weird, like, he's like, I want my Liberace record back tonight. I'm like, what? Like, it's so weird. Like,
yeah. And so famously, Gene Hackman refused to come back for reshoots with Lester, right? And so there are a couple of bits, particularly in that final sequence in the fortress, where it's very clearly a body double and a voice mimic. So that was interesting, and that was stuff like, again, I never noticed that the first time I watched it, but it was clearer now. Lex is pretty superfluous to most of the proceedings. I feel like they had him there because it's like, well, it's Gene Hackman, and like let's have Lex in here. But I really don't feel like he really added all that much. It felt very tacked on.
Very, very much just like a Lex is like Superman's big nemesis. He has to be in it, kind of like, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of what it felt like to me. Again, Gene Hackman was great for what he was doing. Like, and there were a lot of funny moments in the Liberace thing, which is like a fun, like character kind of thing to like I just thought it was funny because it was so like, not like you said, like almost under his breath, like as like the side, like just like this character kind of like affectation, just be like, oh, this is like a personality thing to Lex that just throw on. But then also, I think it was in the Donner cut where he's like the Arkansas slasher pees his pants or something, or did you remember? He's like, spread the word. Like they're doing laundry and like, I don't think that was in the Lester cut. And that was a joke that was actually funny. That was like,
yeah, they actually, no, that's a great point. They, I think like wherever possible, Donner, like even for stuff that Donner originally filmed, I think wherever like there was an alternate take or something like that, he used it. Cause like, I mean, this is the tiniest moment, but when he tells that other prisoner, like, I want my record back in the Lester cut, I think the guy says like, tonight, like you want it back tonight. And then in the Donner cut, he's like, oh, it's scratched. I might be flipping them, but like the prisoner's response is different. Again, it's like a super tiny detail, but
yeah.
But I think like wherever they could, they use different things. I
wonder if that was an ad-lib line by Gene Hackman.
Maybe.
like look, we're just gonna like put this in because it was like it was like a fun like character thing to put on him, but like he was having a different conversation and he just kind of like said it like off to the side as to like ground, like again, like grounding it in reality of like not just like spewing out dialogue on a script, but like making it feel like a lived in world,
I've said this before, but I don't love this version of Lex. I love Gene Hackman. Like he's a great actor. But I just don't really care for this like campier real estate obsessed Lex. But I will say one of my favorite moments in the movie and probably my favorite Lex moment is when Superman shows up at the Daily Planet and Lex is like, oh, Superman, thank God. And he catches himself and he goes to the side. He's like, I mean, go get him. I do like that moment.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah. That was good. Yeah. No, yeah. Gene Hackman's like, again, for what he's doing, like the take that he's doing, I think he's awesome. Yeah. Again, my Lex will always be Michael Rosenbaum because he's like, the best. But yeah, like again, I do really like this Perry White.
Yeah, me too.
For one of them, like, because like this guy's like, it's like like angry and like revved up, and you know, like he feels like he's like on like he's probably taking like heart medication and stuff because of all the stress that he's under, you know. Like he just feels like that like revved up like newspaper reporter. So like I do like that version of Perry White a lot.
It's funny, like Perry and Jimmy are like barely in the movie.
Yeah. Jimmy has like I think 2 scenes.
Yeah. They really don't have a ton to do. And then I guess that kind of takes us to the showdown in the fortress. And so basically, like, I know I said this before, but like that fight sequence, that was a Lester addition. And thankfully that went. I mean, all like the goofy powers about like peeling off the shield and the hologram, like that was all like so weird. It was so weird.
What was that cellophane S that he just like bizarre, so bizarre. Yeah.
Yeah. So that you know, that was gone. So you didn't like the trick that Superman played on the criminals? Because I actually liked, where he pretends we can lay it out, but you didn't like it?
Well, it's not that like I didn't like the idea of it, because like I like the idea that he uses his brain as well as his like strength to beat them. Like I like that, but like it just feels so, the whole sequence to me just feels so anticlimactic to like this fight that they had, right? And also the fact that like the fight is like stopped, like he like runs away to the Fortress of Solitude. Like that's like a weird, like,
I know,
like it just feels strange that like it's not like he drags them kicking and screaming to the fortress in the middle of the fight. It's like he's like, no, peace, I'm leaving, and like it just runs away. And like that to me is like weird, because it's like almost like a cowardish kind of move, because Lex is the one who's like, I can tell you where they are. It's not, he doesn't know that. It. Yeah, like Superman, when he makes that choice to leave, it's not like he's leading them to the fortress. He's just like, I'm out, I'm peace. Like, and like, I'm just like, this is strange. And then like again, like at the end, the confrontation is it just feels very anticlimactic. Like it doesn't have a powerful like, yeah, Superman moment. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, like.
It's a good point, because it's true. Like he turns tail and he leaves, right? And of course, like we know he's setting up this ruse where, well, we'll get to that, but and we hadn't mentioned this, but right, like Lex, you know, Lex's main thing in this movie, again, he doesn't have a ton to do, but he and Miss Tessmacher do discover the fortress, right? And in the Lester cut, they see like the Kryptonian scientist, and I think Lara too there, I forget, but definitely the Kryptonian scientist, like talking about Zod. Right, like that's where Lex like learns about Zod.
Yeah,
and then in the Donner cut, he actually like he sees Jor-El. But anyway, but Superman doesn't know this at this point in the story. So like when he leaves, and like you said, it's not like he's goading them into following him or anything like that.
He's out.
He has no indication that Lex knows where the fortress is. So I don't know what the plan was there.
I think it was like rushed. Yeah, like when they're making, we just kind of rushed it through. Like I don't think they were like expecting, you know, 40 years later, whatever it is, us to be dissecting it like scene for scene, you know. But it is interesting that again, these movies are held to this. Like the first one deserves it, but I'm saying like this one, it's strange that this movie, people compare Man of Steel to this and think this one's more optimistic, where I feel like at every turn Superman makes like not heroic moves, whereas like in Man of Steel, like there was there's destruction in this one though too. Like there was plenty of destruction. It just like wasn't as aggressive because they couldn't do it back then with the special effects, you know?
Right.
But it's like I said, like it's such an anticlimactic, like unheroic, like he just kind of runs away and then like, again, like has no like knowledge that they're going to follow him at all, you know? And then does the switcheroo thing. Yeah.
So like, again, I'm glad that the Donner cut removed that added fight sequence, because that was very silly. But as far as the switcheroo, what I liked about it, I thought it was clever on Superman's part, but especially because of the way he used Lex. Right, like he has this whole bit where he whispers to Lex, like, try to get them into this chamber, it'll remove their powers. No, like, and he knows that Lex will turn on him, right? And that proves true, and they make Superman go in, but he's reprogrammed it, so it instead just removes the other's powers. So I liked that, like, it showed how well he knows Lex, and he knows how to play Lex. And I thought that, like, I liked it for that aspect.
Agreed, totally agreed.
To your earlier point, I meant to say this then. There's a deleted Donner scene where the North Pole police take Zod and Non and Ursa away.
Really?
So this raises an interesting question, right? Because again, what's canon? What's canon is what's actually in the movie. And in the movie, it really appears like they die. And Superman seems real cavalier about it.
Yeah.
Where he almost takes delight in, and you know, you talk about like un-Superman-like behavior. It's like, you know, like he seems real pleased with himself and with Lois, like when these powerless Kryptonians seemingly plummet to their deaths.
Yeah, yeah.
But there is, in fairness, there is a deleted scene. You could probably find it on YouTube.
Why wasn't that in the Donner Cut then?
I don't know. That's the thing. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Because it really, like, you watch that, and again, it's like, you don't see how far down it goes, but like, it looks pretty far, and you know they don't have powers, and it's the North Pole. Like, the chances of surviving like seem real low.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is that deleted scene.
I do love that shot of when Lex is like, "Oh, he switched it," and Christopher Reeve is like, he does that like head thing. That's a great like little like moment for sure. Yeah,
that is. Yeah, I love that.
That's that cool factor that I always talk about that like he has. You know,
yeah. Oh, you know, one other thing, because you asked me before about the depiction of Zod and the criminals. And again, overall, I did like it. But I know we keep comparing this to the Snyder stuff, but I mean, they use the same characters. So it's like, I don't think it's inappropriate. You know, as we talked about when we did the Snyder thing, like, I thought that they gave Zod in Man of Steel like so much more nuance, and he had like a very, I think, an interesting and compelling motivation where it's like, yes, there's an element of revenge, but like more than anything, it's like he wants to keep Krypton alive, right? This is, you know, a pretty bare bones, just like, hey, your father imprisoned me, I'm gonna get you, kid, sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, he's also like a dictator. Like it's established that this version of Zod is like kind of like hell bent on being like a dictator, which they're two different interpretations of the character. And I do agree that the new one does have more nuance, but I do think that there is something to be said about just straight up bad guys and in like, because that's one of the things that in most modern stuff like this, they always have to like try to make the bad guy, like you have to understand where they're coming from kind of thing. Like in Spider-Man's kind of like notorious for this, those Spider-Man movies where they're always like, they're bad guys with hearts of gold kind of thing. And like, you can like really empathize with them. And like, I do think there's something nice in superheroes that where the bad guy is just like a bad guy. Like it doesn't have to go deeper than that because like you make him so bad. In contrast, it makes Superman look so good or whatever hero you're doing. Right. Like you can have like, just like, the purely like bad nihilistic, like in this case, like a dictator, like he just purely wants to rule people. Right. And like, there have been people like that in history, right? Like psychotic, like kings and dictators and stuff. Right. So like, it's a different take on Zod, but it's one that I don't think is not valid because I do think it's still compelling enough of a villain for Superman to fight, you know?
Yeah.
I appreciate the fact they weren't trying to like, get the violin out and make you feel bad for Zod, you know? Like I like that he was just like a force that like you were supposed to hate and like just rally behind Superman to hate. Like I do think there's something like clean, like a clean storytelling aspect of villains like that I don't think are used enough in modern storytelling, you know?
No, fair enough. Your point is well taken. I don't disagree. And I guess, you know, it's interesting you see the evolution, right? And I think like for a more modern movie, I think it made sense to kind of flesh the character out a little bit, but I do think that it certainly worked. I think the effect, you know, was it worked well. I do wish, like, it would have been interesting to get more of Superman's like feelings and thoughts and reactions to the fact that there are actually other Kryptonians where he thought he was the last one. Like, I think there, you know, that would have been interesting to see kind of play out in any, you know, meaningful way. But so there is that deleted scene where they live and they're carted off. But again, that's not in either cut of the movie.
Yeah, either cut. Yeah. I didn't even know about that. So that's why I assumed Superman just killed them in both versions. Cause it looks like they kind of fall into the abyss and in the fortress, like I'm assuming nobody else knows the fortress exists. Right. So the fact that snow police gets it, like,
yeah, it's like, I think it says like North Pole Police. It's like,
oh, wow. Okay.
And they have like it's funny because they have like all these cars. It's like, how much action do you get? Like how many, what's the manpower of this police force? You have to wonder. But the other interesting thing in the Donner Cut is that Superman destroys the fortress.
Yes. Yeah. I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
And I think that really, again, like in terms of thematically, like really tying the first two movies together, you know, and in this movie, the fact that he loses the ability to converse with Jor-El Jor-El has to sacrifice himself to give Superman his powers back. And then, I mean, I assume he destroys the fortress because its location has been compromised. I mean, Lex knows it, and Zod and the others as well. So he uses his heat vision, and it's like, again, further, severing that tie with where he comes from. Like, I think that was pretty powerful.
Yeah, I liked it too, because I mean, like, I feel like we're the same on this, is that I like less Jor-El in these movies, or in Superman in general. Like, to me, like, I like Jor-El being there at the beginning, singing the rocket, but I don't really like him having like prolonged interactions with an AI interface that's like Jor-El's mind when he's like older. Like, to me, it's like, I want him to get all his like guidance from the Kents, because to me, that's what makes him Superman. Like on Krypton, like, well, yeah, I mean, this is another nitpick that I had with it, but like the Kryptonians at one point say something like, oh, these people can't even fly, or something like that. And I'm like, well, you couldn't either until like a day ago. Like, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, did you see that there was, I can't remember what cut that was in between the two, but I think Ursa makes some comment that they're weak, or they can't fly, or like some observation that they can't do what the Kryptonians can do. And I was like, well, you guys couldn't do that on Krypton either. Like, this is supposed to be all new to you as well. Like, yeah,
no, for sure. And I mean, so again, the destruction of the fortress, I think, is interesting. It's a powerful moment. In the Donner cut, this all ends up being for nothing. Which ending did you prefer? The magic memory erasing kiss, or the reversing of time in the Donner cut?
Okay. So I hate the time reversal. Like, because I mean, that's my big problem with the first movie too, is like, I think that movie's almost perfect except for the time reversal, because to me, it's like, it's the Flash's thing, man. Like, that's not Superman can't do that. Like, so I hate that they use the time reversal, but I hate even more that he erases her memory with the kiss. So like, I got to go with the Donner version ending. Cause not only is that a power that like that makes Superman super creepy, I think, like to erase her memory with the kiss, but it's also like a power that's never been established before or since. It's this, like, to me, more than anything, that feels like we ran out of time. Let's throw this idea in there. And like, it reeks of like we ran out of ideas. We ran out of time. Got to get this done quick. And who cares? This is a kid's movie. Who cares?
I can't take credit for this. I think I saw this like on some YouTube comment or something like this, but like, is that in the Lester cut, the ability to erase memory, like, can he only achieve that through a kiss? What happens if Jimmy or Perry find out his secret? What does he do then? It's like, yeah.
Did you ever see that Robot Chicken that they did with the DC characters?
No.
Oh, do you know what a Robot Chicken is?
Yeah.
With the action figures.
Mm-hmm.
They did a whole DC special. This was like 10 years ago, and it ended with Superman going around kissing everyone to erase their memory. Like, it was funny. It was really funny.
So, well, let me say this. Yeah, I don't like the kiss, but ultimately I found the time reversal more offensive on a larger scale. So if I had to pick, I would pick the memory kiss, but I hate to say it. I really do, because I don't like it. I don't like it. But
yeah, no. Well, because the memory kiss also, like, I feel like it's creepy. You know what I mean? There's like a creep factor to it that like he's like roofing her or something. Like, yeah, it's like it's not what he's doing, but it's like it's close, and like it feels like gross, and like it feels so un-Superman like that. I'll definitely side with the time reversal, even though that's like egregiously like stupid. But
I'll say this: I don't mind the time reversal in the first movie. It's not my favorite thing of all time, but I don't mind it because he only reverses time a short period, and it's the extreme scenario where Lois is dead and he's too late, and it's like he has to do something. And it does kind of it does pay off, Jor-El's earlier warning, right, about you're not to interfere in the course of human history. And so I like it in that sense. Like, I feel like of the two movies, like, it worked for me well enough in Superman the movie. Again, still not my favorite thing, but I was okay with it. With Superman 2, I mean, look, there's also the goofy aspect of, we already got it in Superman the movie, and I understand, like, Donner wanted to present it the way it was like originally intended. you know, when they originally were going to do something different in Superman the movie. I do wish that he had done something different with his cut. And to be honest, it's like you could have just ended it with Superman dropping off Lois, and then he flies off and he winks at the camera. That would have been fine.
Yeah, no, I agree. But also the mechanics, this is my problem with the mechanics of time travel in both 1 and 2, is that he reverses time, but like it's done, the way the movie presents itself is that when he reverses time, the problems just go away.
Yeah, I know.
And like in Superman 1, it's presented that he reverses time, so therefore the Rockets just forget about it. He saves Lois. But like if he reverses time, he would then still have to go through all the same stuff. So in this one, it's like he reverses time and the Kryptonians just never show up. And it's like, wait, what? Like the sequence of events still have to play out. Like unless when he reverses time, he like somehow stops it. But like he was powerless. He had no idea. Like when the Kryptonians showed up, he had no power. So like that whole, like the mechanics of it just don't make sense to me. It's almost like it was just kind of like a ill thought out, like, oh, we just don't want to deal with any of this crap that happened. So, we reverse time and it's all fixed. But like the time travel mechanics don't line up for me.
This is why you and I get along so well, I think, because that's always been the problem that I've had with Superman the movie and in the Donner cut of Superman 2. The exact same thing. It's like he rewinds everything. It's like, okay. But it's like, yeah, like you said, everything that was still set in motion. And I don't know if it just would have been too costly. They didn't want to waste the time, like to show him like stopping the thing that now he knows is going to happen. Right. But without that, it's like, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. So like, that's definitely a problem with it. But like the larger problem that I have, I guess it's twofold with the Donner cut. One is that, you know, in Superman the movie, it's like Lois was dead. It's like he had to do something. In this movie, it was like, well, Lois was sad that she knows his secret and she can't be with him. It's like, that's not enough to justify rewinding time. And again, in Superman the movie, it's like a few minutes. It's like in this, it's like he does days.
Yeah.
And it just like it just undermines the impact of everything. It undermines the impact of having to say goodbye to Jor-El and destroy the fortress. It's like, it's a baffling choice to me. And, you know, look, I respect that for Donner. He was like, look, this is my chance to show you what I originally wanted to do. I'm going to stick to that and I'm going to show it to you as best we can. And you know what? It's like, fair enough. But I do just wish, you know, like, you know how at the beginning of the movie, there's text that says, you know, there were some things we didn't get to film, so we're using test footage, right? I wish that if he had just done that and said, like, you know, originally we were going to end with time travel, but we decided to, you know, not do that so that you can actually now watch Superman the movie and Superman 2, the Donner cut, and you get a complete story. I wish he had done that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think we're forgetting that, like, these movies, when they were made, like, they were thought of as like, these are just straight kids movies. You know what I mean? Like we're looking back at them now, like in our 30s, like critically, like, because like superheroes, like storytelling has like evolved and become more serious and more like well thought out and more like people like take it way more seriously than people who make it grew up with it. So they have this love for it. But like, you know, at the time, like I think a lot of things that were put into the Lester cut and some of the goofier elements of the Donner cut, like, it was thought of in the sense of like, this is like, we want to have a fun movie for kids, you know? So that it is like, I'm trying to like, I guess not justify the time travel thing from it, but like, I guess that was like something flashy they thought they had to put in there, you know?
Yeah. No, look, I get what you're saying. And you know, look, like I loved this as a kid. You know, I'm disappointed now. Like I've gone back to watch it. I'm like, like it doesn't really hold up the way that I thought it did. But you know, to your point, it's like, yeah, like it was for a different audience, whether, you know, certainly for a younger audience and just for, you know, this was decades ago. I think audiences had different tastes and expectations. And so, and you know, let me say this, because I do think this is important, because I know we've we've had a lot of fun at the movie's expense, but just justifiably, I think. But like, just as when we talked about Snyder, like we made the point, like, you know, if you don't like the Snyder movies, like we're not you know, trying to force you to, you know, rewatch them or try to change your mind. It's like, we want to make the case for it. We want to share what we love about the movies. And even in that episode, we talked about things we didn't like. You know, here it's a little bit flipped, right? But, you know, same thing here. It's like, you know, it's not like we want to take away from anyone's enjoyment of Superman 2. It's like, if you grew up watching, well, I mean, we grew up watching it, but it's like, if you went to the theater when this first came out and you watched it and it's a part of your childhood or your early adulthood and you have great affection for the movie, and that's wonderful. It's like, I wouldn't, you know, I don't want to take that away from anyone, but I do think it's fair to revisit it. And I feel like for those who hold this up as such a great Superman movie, I wonder how recently they've watched it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's kind of how I feel about the Tim Burton Batman movies, right? Like, now those are movies that I've watched a ton, both of them, and they hold huge places of nostalgia to me. And like, I still love those movies, but like, I just recently watched both of them and they're not very good, like by modern standards, right? Like, there's definitely things you can pick apart. Like, Michael Keaton he's questionable as Bruce Wayne, you know? It's like, so there's definitely like I can definitely like I don't want anyone who like loves these Superman movies to be like mad at us because we're like kind of like, you know, picking them apart, because we're doing it like analytically. Like we love Superman, you know, and if you love this version of this character or this movie version, more power to you. That's awesome that you love it, you know? Like, I mean, like I've said many times through our conversations, is that I view every one of these things as like a different sort of artistic vision, and like one doesn't supersede the other for me. Like, I'm cool with like just viewing them all as different interpretations, and I'm like happy with that. Like, and I like how they're all wildly different from each other. Like, I think when we get to the point where they start becoming like monotonous and too similar and too homogenous, that's when they'll be less interesting and less fun, you know?
No, I'm with you. And I think sometimes I don't think defensive is the right word, but sometimes I feel some sort of way with the Donner movies when I feel like people hold them up like at the expense of, for example, the Snyder movies, like where people are so beholden to the Donner movies that it's hard to accept a different version. I think that's where I get a little frustrated, and where I say, like, look, like, you know, there's a lot to love about the Donner movies, but, you know, there are other aspects where maybe they don't hold up so great, and it's okay to have different versions.
Well, it's interesting to me because the Donner movies, they're not reflective at all of like, say, the post-crisis Superman world, right? So that's one of the things that I think that like a lot of people who aren't Superman fans per se, but are comic book fans, but don't necessarily have an investment in the current Superman, I think that's why they like in their head, this is Superman. This is the one that like they've attached with when they were kids. They've never read the John Byrne forward. They've never read, you know, the 2000s, you know, the Joe Kelly and stuff, all that good stuff. Or they never read the New 52 or like the Patrick Gleason stuff, you know, recently. Like, so that to me is probably where a lot of that comes from, you know, because Superman, like we've talked about, he's iconic and he's popular, but at least among comic book fans, he definitely doesn't feel like he's the number one people's favorite, right? Like in the broad sense of like population, I think he would rank up very high with Batman. I think just random people, Superman probably ranks very high as like their favorite character in comics, right? But people who just offhandedly like don't really think about this stuff at all, right? But among comic book fans, Superman doesn't quite seem to do as well in popularity. So I always find that very interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I do think that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you poll the average comic book fan, it's like you get a lot of Batman, you get a lot of Spider-Man, you get some more Wolverine, you get that sort of stuff. But yeah, just in terms of like the overall, you know, pop culture awareness, and yeah, I mean, so certainly for a whole generation, like I know, you know, these movies were incredibly formative. Just as, you know, I'm coming off of multiple episodes on this podcast about Adventures of Superman from the 50s. And it's like, yeah, like you see how the character changes. And, you know, I'll also, I'll argue against myself for a moment here. Cause like with the Snyder movies, you know, my whole thesis was like, look, you have to buy into the fact that this is Superman in the real world in modern times. Like people are distrusting. You know, it's reasonable that Clark would really have to negotiate like how he's going to step into the world, what he's going to do. And I feel like a lot of people were either unable or unwilling to do that. And that in part was why a lot of people seem not to like it. But I'll argue against, or I'll use the same argument on myself here. It's like, yeah, I think, you know, looking at either cut of Superman 2, it's like, yeah, this is a version where Superman is the essence of the character, right? Clark really truly is a disguise. And, you know, it was a different time, and, you know, storytelling sensibilities are a little different, you know, all that stuff. So, you know, fair enough. And there's a lot of stuff that I like about the movie. I mean, as much as I wish the execution had been maybe fleshed out a bit more with, you know, giving up the powers and the relationship with Lois. But honestly, the fact that they even explored a relationship with Lois, I thought was cool. And
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And I say that now, having just rewatched almost all of the Adventures of Superman TV series. And it's like, maybe there's a handful of episodes where they even flirt with the idea of anything between Lois and Clark. Like you get almost none of that over 100 episodes. Yeah. So the fact that like they like a huge part of this movie dealt with that, I think is really cool. And I think overall, yeah, the three Kryptonian criminals, I think they were effective villains for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if I was going to talk about the stuff I like about it, I think top to bottom, the acting is probably like the best thing about this, right? Because like in the 70s, like, you know, that was a known benchmark for like really good acting. And like, I think Christopher Reeve, Margot Kidder, the guy who plays Perry White and Jimmy, of course, the Kryptonians, Gene Hackman, like top to bottom, every performance I think is like really good. Like no one's like phoning it in. No one's doing like a campy kids show kind of like performance. Like they're all doing like, they're acting their ass off, and they're working in that realm of reality that we were talking about, that Donner like established. Even in the Lester cut, like you could tell that the actors are still operating on the sense of, we're trying to take this really seriously, you know? So.
No, for sure. And, you know, I'm glad that, you know, I'm glad we have the Donner cut. Like, it's cool to see what he had intended. It was really cool to get to see those Jor-El scenes and that altered opening. You know, that the new opening sequence and the Jor-El scenes, I think really, you know, it would have been a shame if those were forever, you know, lost to fans. So I think that's really cool. And it was, you know, fun to be able to compare the two. I appreciate you watching both of them, and I'm so glad that you wanted to do this. Was there anything else that you wanted to say about Superman 2?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything. Yeah, I think pretty much, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. What about you? Any other little last thoughts on it?
No, I mean, that's it. I mean, I think overall, I feel like I've said everything I need to say. Like, it didn't, I mean, I'm sad to say, like, it didn't hold up. It didn't match the memory that I had of the movie. I didn't hate it, but I think, you know, I had a certain expectation of what my enjoyment level was going to be based on how I had enjoyed it in the past. And, you know, it didn't really do it. I don't know if it was just, you know, changing tastes or being older or, you know, a mixture of things. But it was definitely interesting to compare the two. Yeah, I don't know. I think there were just some like big picture choices in the movie that I just couldn't really get behind. You know, I mean, yeah, I think the pacing was a little slow and all, but I could have gotten around that. But I think, you know, the things that we talked about in terms of the, you know, primarily the depowering and all of that. Yeah, I don't know. It was great. It was definitely worth watching both cuts though. And for anyone who hasn't seen either one, I do recommend it. Yeah.
Especially close together so that you can pick out the differences. That's for sure. Like, you know, so it's a lot of movie to get through though, if you're going to do that. So
now I know you said that, you know, you've watched Superman, the movie many, many times. So, you know, maybe this is an easy answer, but after rewatching Superman 2, like, are you at all concerned of like, oh, like if I like when I go to rewatch Superman, the movie, like that might not stand up the way I think it will. Are you confident?
No. Cause I just watched that recently, like a couple of years ago. I think was most recent. It was like last year or something. Superman, that one still holds up. I mean, obviously there's the, like going into it, knowing it's the 70s, knowing it's a different version of the character, like all that stuff you said, I feel like you got to buy into all that to like know that it's, you know, but it's still really good. And I think it still holds up really well. The ones that don't hold up well or even worse are 3 and 4. Like those movies are so bad. Like, so, I like when I was, this is gonna sound bad, but when I was watching this movie, the Lester cut, when it was finished, Laura was walking by and I turned to her and I was like, this movie's making me question why I even like Superman. Like, because it was so corny, right? Like, but then like, you know, like I read some comics and stuff. I was like, oh no, Superman's cool. Like, you know, but this movie is definitely a time capsule from an era when they definitely didn't take it seriously. And that was my big thing, is that the first one feels like they were trying to make a real movie. And this one felt like they were trying to make like a Saturday morning, like kids kind of like, you know, like knock it out kind of thing. Like Tron or something like that. Like a cheap kids movie is kind of what it felt like to me.
Yeah. No. And again, I think, you know, if the entire thing had been shot by Donner, you know,
it would have been different. It wouldn't have ended with the time travel. Like, I really don't think that the old man with the thing would have stayed in with him beating that guy up. Like, I mean, I know you said he shot it, but like they didn't put in the snow police. So, you know, I don't think that would have made the final cut.
But
like,
he made his Donner cut. I mean, that's the thing. Like and that's what's so weird to me is like, so he included that in the Donner cut. And there's another deleted scene where Clark is at the end of the movie before the second diner scene. Clark is getting onto the elevator, and like this big burly guy at the Daily Planet, like they collide, and the guy's like, hey, watch where you're going. And Clark is like, oh, sorry. And then like he has this moment where you see him remember, and he's like, he doesn't say it, but you could see it on his face of like, oh yeah, there's that guy at the diner. I got to go teach him a lesson. So it's like he has this little interaction with a bully at the Daily Planet, and like that's what sparks him to go and teach Rocky a lesson. But like the fact that he's reversed time, like none of the events of the movie now have occurred. So he's going to this diner. I don't know. It was a weird. I thought that was such an odd choice to leave that in the Donner cut. But you know, it's there. Yeah. But I feel like, don't you think fans like? I feel like that's a scene that people tend to like. I mean, I've not polled people, but
really,
I mean, I don't know. I feel like
I've never heard anyone because I totally forgot that was in the movie completely. Like I totally forgot that was in. So that would shock me if that's like a fan favorite scene where Superman like beats up like an unsuspecting like truck driver. But again, you're right though. That was that was something I want to say. That was in Man of Steel. It was a callback in Man of Steel. But to me, Man of Steel was the right version of that, because it's like the guy picks a fight with him. He doesn't pick a fight with the guy. First off, that's the big problem that I have with this to begin with, is that Clark in the first scene when he has no powers picks a fight with this guy. Like this guy is like if he told Lois, come on, let's go sit somewhere else, and there wouldn't have been an altercation. Like, so like in Man of Steel, he's trying to like protect this girl who's being groped by this like disgusting like guy in the bar, and he's like, hey, cut that out. Like, and that guy starts like starting an altercation with him, and he pushes him and he pours beer on him and everything. And Superman just kind of like calmly walks away. And then as he's walking out, he's like, I'll fuck the guy a little bit. Like, you know, like I'll break his truck, you know, but he doesn't he for the most part takes the high road. Right. I mean, like he does like quote unquote teach him a lesson, but it's not like and then he doesn't go back though either. That'd be like the equivalent at the end of the movie. He goes back in his Superman costume. Okay, remember me? Boom, and like just kicks the shit out of him. Like it's like, it makes no sense. Like, oh. Yeah, it does ring as like especially petty from Superman. And you know what? Let me argue this in Clark's defense in the first scene, because like it does seem out of character that he would escalate the situation the way that he does. But maybe that's a function of like he wants to prove to Lois and to himself that like, you know, I'm still Superman, right? I'm still myself, or I'm still the guy who can protect you. And obviously it goes sideways for him real fast, but maybe there's some element of that. And maybe that's, you know what, I don't know. Now I'll kind of maybe look at that scene a little bit differently. Like maybe that's a scene that shows more of his humanity, like, and the hubris. But it ends with him being like, I'm nothing without my powers. I'm a failure. Like, right. like that's the thing. It's like, like again, there's a version of that could be powerful, but like what's shown is an incredibly petty, incredibly like weak, like spiritually weak. I don't mean like physically weak. I mean like his spirit, his willpower is like weak in that scene. Like it just to me, again though, 70s like mentality. Like I think the whole like macho thing was more like in vogue. Like I feel like now it's seen at like de-escalating situations and like being calm and almost zen-like is seen more now culturally as like a plus, as being like that's what heroism is. Whereas like I feel like in the 70s there was probably more of that like chest beating, peacocking kind of like attitude, I guess, you know, and like what was seen as like masculine, I guess. I don't know, but like it just rings so like weird to me that Superman would act that way. And to me, it's like the most out of character thing, like in any like Superman like thing in any version of the character. I just find it very strange.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah,
like,
that was
your listeners tuned in to hear us talk about Superman 2, but what we really did was like deep dive on this one scene where he like interacts with this trucker.
You know, again, I think the trucker scenes and, you know, this idea that like he can't be Superman and have a relationship. And right, because that's ultimately what motivates the ending, whether it's the magic kiss or the time reversal, is like, you know, he can't be with Lois. And also for some reason, it's just like so unbearable for Lois. I feel like that does Lois a disservice. And again, maybe this is a function of the time period, right? And maybe the fact that Superman has no conversation with her about giving up his powers is also a function of the time period, right? As much as Lois was, you know, and has always been like, you know, very progressive in terms of how, you know, a female character is depicted. I mean, she's been a working professional, go-getter, you know, but still, I think maybe the fact that Superman doesn't talk to her, and yeah, maybe the fact that it's like, it's really painted, she's painted as like, this is so hard for me to see you every day. I mean, especially the Lester cut, like she's a mess.
Yeah.
In that scene before he kisses her, you know, so, you know, maybe it's a function of that, but I do think it does Lois a disservice as well. And I just disagree with this idea that like they can't be together because he's Superman. And on top of that, it's like the knowledge of his secret and the knowledge that they can't be together is just so painful for her that
she makes some comment that like, knowing that I have to share you with the world, or like knowing that like you're out there risking your life, I can't take it. It's like, well, how do like wives of like firemen feel? And like, you know what I mean? Like, or like soldiers, or like people who have like in real life have like very dangerous, very difficult, very self-sacrificing type of jobs. And it's like I don't know. I just, it's very like, to me, again, it felt like a rushed kind of ill thought out, like, well, we got to get back to the status quo. We got to end this with the status quo. Superman 3 is the status quo, and it's a cheap kids movie. So who cares? Like they'll see it in theaters for 6 months. They'll go away and no one will ever watch it again, because what are DVD? Like, you know, like I don't think the anticipation of like DVDs and like this lasting, I think was never across anyone's mind, you know?
I think that's probably why we got such lengthy recaps at the beginning of the movie as well. Right. Cause it's like, you know, it wasn't like, oh, everyone's just watching this at home over and over. So, you know, again, maybe we can chalk it up to that. Listen, do you know how long we've been talking?
I'm looking at the clock, like 2 hours, maybe. Yeah.
Did it feel like 2 hours, or did it fly by?
No, it went by very quick.
Right, good.
Very, very quick. Yeah. I hope your listeners got as much, had some fun with us too. Like again, if you like this movie and you love this version, like we are fans too. I just want to reiterate that I like Christopher Reeve. I love him. Love his version of Superman. Like him in the suit is my favorite. So, but the film itself it's, you know, if you like it, more power to you. Like if you think it's perfect, awesome. Like, that's great.
Yeah. Well said. All right. Well, Ken, thank you as always. I always love having you on. It's always so much fun. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back. It's always so much fun to hang out and talk superheroes, Superman.
And barring a change in expected release date of the Snyder Cut, you and I will be back at the end of March to talk about the Snyder Cut. And man, I cannot wait for that. Man.
Can't wait. I can't wait.
So thank you, Ken. Thank you to our audience, and make sure you tune in for the next episode. And until then, remember, it's about what you do. It's about action. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Art by Greg Schiegel, music by Basic Printer. If you like what you heard, be sure to listen to My Comic Shop History, available on most major podcast platforms. Sign up for exclusive additional content, including the Digging for Kryptonite companion podcast at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato, and watch my documentary film, My Comic Shop Country, out now on Apple TV and Amazon.